The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Sam Whitaker's weathered hands gripped the wooden ladder. Each rung creaked under his weight as he climbed, the sound echoing in the quiet morning air. The sign he carried felt heavier than its actual weight, a simple piece of wood with carefully painted letters that would tell the town what they'd already begun to whisper about. Closing soon. Thank you for 37 years. Sam's fingers trembled as he tied the rope, securing the sign above his storefront. The knot wasn't quite as neat as Ellen would have made it. She'd always been better at those little details. Looking at his uneven handiwork, he could almost hear her gentle teasing. Sam Whitaker, how did you manage to make a square knot look round? The thought of Ellen made his chest tighten. The store had been her dream first, a place where neighbors could gather, share stories, and find what they needed. She'd always said it wasn't just about selling groceries and hardware. It was about creating a space where people felt at home. As Sam climbed down, his old knees protesting each step, Mrs. Henderson from the church choir was already waiting by the door. Her face fell as she read the sign. "Oh, Sam," she said, pulling him into a warm embrace that smelled of lavender and fresh-baked bread. "We all hoped it wouldn't come to this." "Me too, Margaret," Sam replied, fishing his keys from his pocket. The familiar jingle was another reminder of all he was about to lose. But the mayor's mind is made up. Progress, she calls it. Throughout the day, the store filled with familiar faces. Old Tom Cooper shuffled in with his grandson Joey, just like he did every Thursday. The boy's eyes lit up at the candy counter, just as his father's had 30 years ago. "Remember when you used to let me pick out penny candy after school?" Tom asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Ellen would always throw in an extra piece, said growing boys needed the sugar." Sam nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He watched as Tom pressed $1 into Joey's hand, letting the boy carefully select his treats from the glass jars that Ellen had arranged so lovingly all those years ago. Martha Wilson came in around noon, clutching a casserole dish. "It's your favorite chicken pot pie," she said, setting it on the counter, "just like Ellen used to make for the church suppers. Well, maybe not quite as good as hers, but—" Sam thanked her, knowing he wouldn't be able to eat it. Food hadn't tasted right since Ellen passed, and nowadays it tasted even more like cardboard with the weight of his grief. The afternoon brought Sarah Jenkins, who'd worked summers at the store during high school. Now a mother of 3, she brought her youngest to say goodbye. "This place was my first job," she told her daughter. "Mr. Whitaker taught me more about honest work and treating people right than any school ever could." Each visitor carried a piece of history, a memory that made the store more than just 4 walls and shelves of merchandise. Billy Thompson remembered how Sam had let his family run a tab during the recession of 2008. June Miller recalled how Ellen had special ordered her wedding cake topper when the original broke 2 days before the ceremony. As the day wore on, Sam found himself moving through the store like a man in a dream. He straightened items that didn't need straightening, dusted shelves that were already clean. Every corner held an echo of Ellen, her laugh when he'd accidentally ordered too many pickle jars, her satisfied smile when she'd finally arranged the window display just right. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, catching dust motes in golden beams. Sam remembered how Ellen used to say that was God painting with light. Now, it just highlighted the wear on the floorboards, the slight tilt of the shelves, the history written in every scratch and dent. At closing time, Sam couldn't bring himself to turn the sign to "closed" right away. He stood behind the counter, running his hands over the smooth wood worn down by decades of transactions and conversations. The old register still had Ellen's handwritten notes taped to the side, reminders about special orders and which customers preferred paper to plastic bags. Finally, as the sun began to set, Sam climbed the narrow stairs to his apartment above the store. The steps creaked in their familiar pattern. Ellen used to say she could tell at his mood by how he climbed them. Today, they seemed to groan under the weight of his sadness. His dinner was a simple sandwich eaten at the small kitchen table, the one where he and Ellen had shared thousands of meals. The window offered a view of Main Street, now growing quiet as darkness settled in. From here, he could see the changes coming. New buildings rising where old ones had stood, shiny facades replacing weathered brick. The twilight deepened, and Sam watched as a group of construction workers appeared across the street. Their fluorescent vests stood out in the gathering dusk as they moved with purpose, marking buildings with bright red paint. His heart sank as they approached his store, their spray cans ready to mark another piece of the old town for demolition. The red X they painted seemed to glow in the fading light, a stark symbol of everything Sam was about to lose. He pressed his hand against the cool window glass, remembering how Ellen had always kept it spotless, saying, "You never know what beauty might be trying to shine through." But tonight, all Sam could see was the end of everything they'd built together, marked in angry red paint across the street. The early morning chill nipped at Sam's face as he stepped out of his store, coffee cup warming his hands. His worn boots scuffed against the familiar sidewalk of Maple Street, each step heavy with the weight of yesterday's memories. The street was quiet, with only the occasional car passing by and the flutter of sparrows in the oak trees that lined the road. He paused to take a sip of his coffee, letting the warmth spread through his chest. The familiar houses along Maple Street stood like old friends. The Peterson place with its squeaky screen door, old Mrs. Thompson's garden with the first daffodils poking through the soil. These morning walks had become his ritual since Ellen passed, a way to gather his thoughts before facing another day. The crisp spring air carried the sweet scent of blooming cherry trees, but suddenly something else cut through. The acrid smell of smoke. Sam's head snapped up, his coffee forgotten as he scanned the street. Dark plumes rose from behind the row of houses, twisting against the pale morning sky. Without thinking, Sam dropped his cup and broke into a run. His heart pounded against his ribs as he rounded the corner onto Cedar Lane. Flames licked at the windows of the two-story Colonial, orange tongues reaching hungrily toward the roof. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, their faces pale with horror. "Someone's still inside," a woman screamed, pointing at an upstairs window. "A little girl, Emily." Neighbors stood frozen, phones pressed to their ears as they called for help. The sound of distant sirens wailed, but Sam knew they wouldn't arrive in time. The smoke was getting thicker, darker. He didn't hesitate. Shrugging off his jacket, Sam charged toward the house. Someone shouted his name, trying to hold him back, but he pulled free. The heat hit him like a wall as he crashed through the front door, immediately dropping into a crouch where the air was clearer. "Hello?" he called out, his voice rough against the smoke. "Emily, can you hear me?" A small cry answered from upstairs. Through the haze, Sam could make out a tiny figure at the top of the staircase, curled against the wall. The flames had already started climbing the wallpaper, spreading across the ceiling in angry patterns. Sam took a deep breath and started up the stairs, testing each step. The wood groaned beneath him, weakened by the fire. Sweat ran down his face and his lungs burned with every breath. The little girl's sobs grew louder as he approached. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, her pink pajamas smudged with soot, blonde hair tangled around her tear-streaked face. She reached for him with trembling hands. "I've got you," Sam wheezed, wrapping her in his jacket. "Hold on tight to my neck, okay? Don't let go." She nodded against his shoulder, her small arms clutching him desperately. Sam turned back toward the stairs, hunching over to protect her from the worst of the smoke. The heat was becoming unbearable, and the stairs creaked ominously under their combined weight. A section of the ceiling crashed down behind them, sending sparks flying. Sam stumbled but kept his footing, tightening his grip on the child. The front door seemed miles away through the thick smoke, but he forced himself forward, one step at a time. After what felt like hours but must have been seconds, they burst through the doorway into the cool morning air. Sam's legs gave out, and he sank to his knees on the grass, still cradling the girl against his chest. She coughed and trembled, but didn't loosen her grip. The crowd erupted in cheers and shouts. Firefighters swarmed past them, dragging hoses and equipment. Someone draped a blanket over Sam's shoulders, but he barely noticed. The little girl's face was pressed into his neck, her tears soaking his shirt. "You're safe now," he murmured, patting her back gently. "Everything's going to be okay." A commotion in the crowd drew his attention. A woman in an elegant blazer pushed through, her heels clicking against the pavement as she ran. Her carefully styled hair was coming loose, and her face was twisted with fear. "Emily!" she cried out, reaching for the child. Sam carefully unwrapped the girl from his jacket and helped her stand. She swayed slightly, but then rushed into the woman's arms. The woman dropped to her knees, clutching her daughter close, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Mommy!" the girl whimpered, burrowing into her mother's embrace. Sam watched them, his heart still racing, his clothes and face covered in soot. The woman looked up at him, her mascara smeared with tears, and mouthed a silent, Thank you." He nodded, suddenly feeling very tired as the adrenaline began to fade. The chaos continued around them. Firefighters shouting orders, neighbors talking excitedly, sirens wailing. But in that moment, Sam saw only the mother and daughter clinging to each other, safe and whole. It reminded him of the way Ellen used to hug their own daughter. And for the first time in a long while, the memory didn't bring pain, only a warm glow of gratitude that he had been there when he was needed. Sam sat on the weathered wooden bench outside his store, his throat still raw from the smoke. The water bottle in his hand was half empty, and he could still taste the acrid remnants of the morning's rescue. His old bones ached, but it was a good kind of ache, the kind that reminded him he'd done something worthwhile. The first news van pulled up with a screech of brakes, its satellite dish gleaming in the afternoon sun. A young reporter with perfectly styled hair jumped out before the vehicle had fully stopped. More vehicles followed. Their logos splashed across their sides in bright colors. Within minutes, the quiet street transformed into a circus of cameras, microphones, and eager journalists. "Mr. Whitaker," they called out, rushing toward him, "can you tell us about the rescue?" Sam shifted uncomfortably on the bench, unused to such attention. "I just did what anyone would do," he said, his voice scratchy. "But you ran into a burning building." A reporter thrust a microphone toward his face. "What were you thinking?" "Wasn't really thinking at all," Sam admitted, rubbing his neck. "Just saw smoke and knew someone needed help." People began gathering on the sidewalk, pointing and whispering. Some of his regular customers stepped forward to shake his hand, their eyes bright with admiration. "That's our Sam," old Mrs. Peterson declared proudly to a camera crew. "Always thinking of others before himself." The crowd parted suddenly, and Mayor Linda Prescott strode through, her heels clicking against the concrete. Her navy blazer was immaculate, her makeup perfect, but something in her eyes seemed hard and distant. Camera lights flashed as she approached Sam. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, her voice carrying clearly for the cameras, "on behalf of the city, I want to thank you for your heroic actions this morning. You saved my daughter Emily's life, and we are deeply grateful." Sam noticed how she stood slightly away from him, maintaining a careful distance. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and her words, though proper, felt rehearsed and hollow. "Emily's a sweet girl," Sam replied simply. "How is she doing?" "She's resting at home with her grandmother." The mayor's response was clipped, professional. She turned to face the cameras directly. "Mr. Whitaker's bravery reminds us of the strong community spirit that makes our town special." The words seemed to stick in her throat, as if she were reading from an invisible script. Sam watched her carefully, noting how her fingers tightened around her leather portfolio, how she kept glancing at her watch. After a few more pictures and sound bites, the mayor excused herself, leaving Sam to face the continued barrage of questions and congratulations. Throughout the afternoon, people kept stopping by, some bringing small gifts or cards. Tommy from the hardware store brought him a fresh cup of coffee. Sarah from the flower shop presented him with a bright bouquet for our hometown hero. As the sun began to sink lower in the sky, Sam made his way to the town hall for the redevelopment meeting. His chest felt tight with hope. Surely now, after everything, there might be a chance to save his store. The meeting room was packed, with familiar faces turning to smile at him as he entered. Mayor Prescott stood at the podium, her presence commanding attention. The overhead lights caught the silver in her hair as she shuffled her papers, not meeting anyone's eyes. "The council will now vote on the proposed redevelopment plan for the historic district," she announced, her voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "As previously discussed, this includes the demolition of several structures deemed economically non-viable to be replaced with modern retail spaces." Sam's heart sank as she continued, listing off statistics and projections in a monotone voice. When she reached his store's address, she didn't falter, didn't acknowledge that just hours ago, the man who owned it had saved her daughter's life. "The vote stands at 6 in favor, 1 against," she declared, her gavel striking the wooden block with finality. "The motion passes. Demolition will proceed as scheduled." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Sam saw shocked faces turning toward him, saw the disappointment and anger in their eyes. But the mayor's expression remained unchanged, her posture rigid as she gathered her papers. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as people began filing out, some stopping to pat Sam's shoulder or whisper words of encouragement, but he barely heard them. His feet felt heavy as he pushed through the double doors into the evening air. The walk back to his store seemed longer than usual. Each step reminded him of all the mornings he'd made this same journey, unlocking the store at dawn, greeting early customers, sharing coffee with Ellen behind the counter. Now those memories felt like photographs fading in the sun. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, the same bell that had welcomed customers for 37 years. In the dimness, he could make out the familiar shapes of shelves and displays. The old cash register that Ellen had insisted on keeping because she loved its musical ding. The worn spot on the counter where generations of elbows had rested during friendly conversations. Sam didn't bother turning on the lights. He moved through the darkness to his small office in the back, where a framed photo of Ellen still sat on his desk. He picked it up, his fingers tracing the edge of the frame. "What am I supposed to do now?" he whispered to her smiling image. The silence that answered seemed heavier than ever before, filled with the weight of endings and lost hopes. Outside, a car horn honked, and life went on, but inside the darkened store, Sam sat alone with his thoughts, wondering how the same day could bring both heroism and heartbreak, and how the mother of the child he'd saved could so coldly seal his fate. He set Ellen's picture back on the desk, straightening it with care. The darkness pressed in around him, but he remained there, surrounded by the echoes of better days, trying to understand how saving a life could feel so hollow in the face of losing everything else. Sam's hands trembled slightly as he turned the key in the lock of his general store. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street, and he nearly stumbled over the pile of flowers, cards, and small packages crowding his doorstep. His weathered fingers picked up a simple white envelope with "Our Hero" written in careful cursive. Inside, the card read, "Thank you for saving Emily. You've always been there for us. Now let us be there for you." It was signed by the Thompson family, customers for 3 generations. Sam gathered the offerings in his arms, the sweet scent of lilies and roses mixing with the musty smell of his beloved shop. As he arranged them on the counter, the bell above the door chimed. Mrs. Henderson, the retired schoolteacher, shuffled in with tears in her eyes. "Oh, Sam," she said, pulling him into a tight hug. "I heard about everything, the fire, the mayor's meeting. It's just not right." Before Sam could respond, more people filtered in. Tom from the hardware store, Sarah who ran the diner down the street, even old Mr. Peterson who rarely left his house anymore. They weren't there to shop. The shelves were half empty anyway. They came bearing coffee, homemade muffins, and most importantly, their presents. "We're starting a petition," Sarah announced, spreading a sheet of paper on the counter. "Everyone's signing. This store isn't just a building. It's part of who we are." Sam's throat tightened. "You don't have to." "Yes, we do," Tom cut in firmly. "Remember when my Katie was sick? You kept the store open late just so I could get her medicine. And Mr. Peterson here, you delivered groceries to him all winter when his hip was bad." The bell kept ringing throughout the morning. People shared stories, signed the petition, and dropped dollar bills in a jar someone had labeled "Save Sam's Store." Some just sat in the old chairs by the window, the same chairs where their grandparents had once rested their feet. At Sunday service, Pastor John's voice carried through the packed church. "This week, we witnessed true heroism," he said, his kind eyes finding Sam in the third pew. "Not just in saving young Emily, but in the way Sam Whitaker has served this community for decades. His store isn't just a business. It's a sanctuary of memories, of shared life. We must stand together now, as he has always stood for us." Across the aisle, Linda Prescott sat rigid in her seat, Emily fidgeting beside her. The mayor's face was a mask of composure, but her fingers twisted the program in her lap. When the congregation burst into applause at Pastor John's words, Emily clapped enthusiastically until her mother's hand stilled her own. Throughout the week, the store became a gathering place for memories. Mrs. Martinez recalled how Sam had helped her practice English when she first moved to town. He would point to items on the shelves. "Teach me the words," she said, wiping her eyes. "Now my children speak perfect English, and they still come here for candy, just like I did." Young couples remembered their first dates, sharing milkshakes at the old counter. Parents told stories of bringing their babies in, how Sam always had a gentle smile and a free lollipop. The retired police chief reminded everyone how the store had stayed open during the big storm of '98, providing supplies and comfort to stranded travelers. From her office window across the street, Linda watched the steady stream of visitors. Her assistant reported that calls were flooding in, all supporting Sam's store. Emily tugged at her sleeve constantly, asking to visit the nice man who saved me. But Linda held firm, arranging for extra security to keep her daughter safely away from the growing crowds at the store. As dusk settled over the town that evening, Sam's muscles ached from all the hugs, his eyes stinging from held-back tears. He was counting the day's donations, more than he'd ever made in actual sales, when a soft knock echoed from the front door. There stood Emily, her small face pressed against the glass. A worn teddy bear dangled from one hand, its fur matted and loved. Sam hurried to unlock the door. "Mr. Sam?" she whispered, glancing over her shoulder at the distracted bodyguard down the street. "I wanted to say thank you for saving me from the fire." She thrust the teddy bear toward him. "This is Mr. Fuzzy. He keeps me safe at night. I want you to have him." Sam knelt down to her level, his knees creaking. "That's very kind of you, sweetheart. But don't you need him?" Emily shook her head firmly. "Mama says I'm too old for him anyway, and you're the bravest person I know, so he'll be happy with you." Sam accepted the bear with trembling hands, noting the singed patch on one ear, a mark from the fire they'd escaped together. Emily threw her arms around his neck in a quick hug, then darted away before her guard noticed she was missing. Sam stood in the doorway, holding the teddy bear, watching the little girl disappear around as Sam carefully poured steaming cocoa into one of Ellen's old mugs, the blue one with tiny white flowers and a small chip on the rim. Emily perched on a wooden stool at the counter, her legs swinging back and forth as she watched him with bright, curious eyes. "Be careful now. It's hot," Sam said, sliding the mug toward her. The familiar scent of chocolate filled the air, mixing with the store's potpourri of aromas, roasted peanuts, coffee beans, and the sweet lingering traces of penny candy. Emily wrapped her small hands around the warm mug, inhaling deeply. "It smells just like Christmas," she said, her face lighting up. Her grandmother, Mrs. Peterson, sat quietly in the corner, knitting and smiling at their interaction. "Those candy jars up there," Emily pointed to the row of glass containers on the highest shelf. "Were they always here?" Sam followed her gaze to the vintage jars that Ellen had collected over the years. "Every single one has a story," he said, his voice warm with memory. "That big one with the red lid? Your mother used to buy butterscotch from it when she was about your age." Emily's eyes widened. "Mom came here when she was little?" "Oh, yes," Sam chuckled, pulling out an old wooden stepping stool. "Would you like to see something special?" When Emily nodded eagerly, he climbed up and carefully brought down one of the jars. The glass was thick and slightly clouded with age, filled with colorful, hard candies. The floorboards creaked beneath them as they moved to the counter. Emily leaned forward, fascinated by the way the candies caught the light streaming through the front windows. "Tell me about when Mom was little," she pleaded, taking a careful sip of her cocoa. "Did she like candy too?" Sam settled onto his own stool, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Your mother was quite the regular here. Every Friday after school she'd come in with her allowance money." He paused, remembering Linda as a pigtailed girl counting pennies on this very counter. "She always got the same thing, one butterscotch and one cherry drop." Emily giggled, leaving a small chocolate mustache above her lip. "Mom never eats candy now. She says it's not good for you." "Well, people change," Sam said gently, handing her a napkin. The old brass bell above the door chimed as another customer entered, and the floorboards sang their familiar song. Over the next few weeks, Emily's visits became a cherished routine. She would arrive with Mrs. Peterson every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, her school backpack still on her shoulders, eager to explore another corner of the store. Sam found himself looking forward to these visits more than anything else in his day. One afternoon, Emily discovered the collection of old photographs on the wall behind the counter. "Who's that lady with you?" she asked, pointing to a faded picture of Sam and Ellen on opening day, both of them younger and beaming with pride. "That's my wife, Ellen," Sam said softly. "She's the one who made this place special. She knew exactly how to make everyone feel at home." "Like you do," Emily said simply, making Sam's heart catch in his throat. They were examining an old cookie tin when the bell chimed again. Linda stood in the doorway, her tailored suit a stark contrast to the store's worn comfort. Emily froze. But Linda didn't look angry, just tired, and perhaps a little lost. "Mom," Emily called out, "Mr. Sam was showing me the cookie tin where you used to hide notes for your best friend Jenny." Something flickered across Linda's face, recognition, maybe even nostalgia. She nodded briefly at Sam but didn't speak, just waited while Emily gathered her things. As they left, Sam caught Linda's lingering look around the store, her expression unreadable. The visits continued, and Sam found himself sharing more stories about the town's history, about Ellen, about the countless little moments that had made the store more than just a business. Emily soaked it all in, asking questions and sometimes sharing her own observations about how things had changed. "Why does everything have to be new?" she asked one day, running her hand along the smooth wooden counter worn by thousands of transactions. "This feels nice. It feels like home." Sam's throat tightened at her words. Through the front window, he could see the construction equipment parked down the street, a constant reminder of what was coming. But here in the store, with Emily's wonder bringing fresh life to every corner, he could almost believe in miracles again. Each visit became a small act of defiance against time itself. Sam taught Emily how to work the ancient cash register, its keys clicking satisfyingly under her careful fingers. He showed her how to weigh penny candy on the old brass scale, just as he had shown countless children over the decades. Mrs. Peterson would sometimes share her own memories of the store, creating a bridge between generations. One particularly golden afternoon, Emily discovered the bell behind the counter that Ellen used to ring at closing time. Its clear, sweet tone filled the store, and for a moment, Sam could almost feel his wife's presence, could almost hear her laugh mingling with Emily's delighted giggles. That evening, after Emily and Mrs. Peterson had said their goodbyes, Sam stood in the doorway of his store. He watched them walk down the street, Emily's hand in her grandmother's, their shadows stretching long in the setting sun. Emily turned once to wave, her smile bright even at a distance. Sam's hand rested on the doorframe where Ellen had once measured their nieces' and nephews' growing heights. "I can't let this place die," he whispered into the quiet store. "Not for her, not for Ellen." The words hung in the air, a promise and a prayer wrapped into one. The warm evening air hummed with excitement as strings of twinkling lights crisscrossed above Whitaker's General Store. The old building glowed like a beacon against the darkening sky, its windows alive with movement and warmth. Dozens of hand-painted signs decorated the storefront, their messages bold and heartfelt. "Save Whitaker's Store. 37 years of community. Our town's heart." Inside, the usually quiet aisles buzzed with life. The creaky floorboards groaned beneath the weight of what seemed like half the town, all packed between the old wooden shelves and display cases. Someone had pushed the counter against the wall to make room for folding chairs, and the smell of fresh-baked pies mixed with the store's familiar scent of coffee and peanuts. Sam stood near the entrance, overwhelmed by the sea of familiar faces. Mrs. Peterson from the quilting circle served slices of her famous apple pie, while Bob from the hardware store had set up speakers playing gentle country music. Children darted between adults' legs, their laughter mixing with the general chatter and clinking of plates. "Mr. Whitaker!" Emily's voice rang out above the crowd. She weaved through the forest of legs, her grandmother following more slowly behind. "Look what I made!" She thrust a crayon drawing toward him, a colorful rendering of the store with stick figures holding hands all around it. Sam knelt down, his knees creaking to examine the artwork. "Well, isn't this something special?" he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've even got the old clock just right." He pointed to the round shape she'd drawn above the door. The pastor from First Baptist cleared his throat into a microphone someone had set up. The crowd hushed, and Sam felt dozens of hands guiding him toward a chair of honor near the front. "Friends and neighbors," the pastor began, "we're here tonight because this store isn't just four walls and a roof. It's where our children bought their first piece of candy, where we gathered after Sunday service for coffee and conversation, where Sam and Ellen Whitaker created not just a business, but a home for all of us." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Sam's vision blurred as he spotted familiar faces. There was Tom, who'd proposed to his wife right here in aisle 3, and Sarah, who'd worked summers at the counter through high school and now brought her own children in for treats. One by one, townspeople stood to share their memories. Mrs. Jenkins recalled how Ellen had kept her store account running during the tough months after her husband passed. Old Mr. Thompson remembered how Sam had delivered groceries to his house during the big snowstorm of '92. The stories flowed like a river of shared history, each one striking a chord in Sam's heart. He thought of Ellen, how she would have loved this moment. She always said the store was more than just a business. It was the town's living room, where everyone was welcome and no one was a stranger. Near the back of the crowd, a movement caught Sam's eye. Mayor Linda Prescott stood in the shadows, arms crossed over her chest. But something was different about her usual stern expression. Her eyes glistened in the warm light as she watched Emily twirling to the music with other children, her face a complex mixture of emotions. The fundraising table by the window filled with donations, some large, some small, all given with love. Church groups pledged support, and the high school drama club announced they'd dedicate their spring musical proceeds to saving the store. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere grew increasingly festive. Someone started a sing-along of old hymns, voices rising in harmony among the shelves. Children played hide-and-seek between the aisles while their parents shared memories and passed around homemade treats. The local newspaper photographer captured shot after shot, Sam surrounded by longtime customers. Emily teaching other kids the store dance she'd invented, the pile of supportive letters and cards growing higher on the counter. For the first time in months, Sam felt truly hopeful. The weight that had pressed on his chest since the redevelopment announcement seemed lighter. Looking around at the faces of his neighbors, all here for him, all fighting to save this place they loved, he dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would work out. As the clock struck 10, families began gathering their children and heading home. The music softened and the crowd thinned. Sam stood by the door, accepting hugs and words of encouragement as people filed out into the warm night air. "We're not giving up, Sam," the pastor assured him, squeezing his shoulder. "This place means too much to all of us." Sam nodded, too moved for words. He watched as Emily gave him one last wave before her grandmother led her away, Linda following behind them into the darkness. Later that night, after the last supporters had gone and the lights were dimmed, Sam sat in his old chair behind the counter. The store felt different somehow, fuller, warmer, more alive with the echoes of the evening's joy and solidarity. He fell asleep in his apartment above the store, with hope in his heart for the first time in weeks. But the next morning, the harsh reality came roaring back. The sound hit him first, a deep, mechanical growl that shook him from sleep. Sam rushed to his window, his heart sinking at the sight below. 3 yellow bulldozers lined the street in front of his store, their engines idling in the early morning light. Workers in hard hats consulted blueprints while others marked the pavement with spray paint. His legs felt heavy as he descended the stairs to the store. There, nailed to his front door, was a bright orange notice from the city. The words seemed to blur before his eyes, but their meaning was clear. He had 3 days to vacate the premises. Sam's hand trembled as he reached for the notice. The paper crackled under his fingers, and all the warmth and hope from the previous night drained away, leaving him cold despite the morning sun. The roar of the bulldozers felt like thunder in his ears, drowning out the memory of last night's music and laughter. The store stood silent around him, its shelves still holding traces of the celebration, a forgotten paper plate here, a dropped crayon there. But now these remnants of joy only made the notice in his hands feel more cruel, more final. His brief moment of hope crumbled like the walls that would soon fall to the waiting machines outside. Sam's trembling hands lifted the worn recipe box from behind the counter. Sunlight streamed through the dusty window, catching the faded flowers painted on its lid. Ellen's handiwork from decades ago. Each card inside bore her neat handwriting, the corners softened and stained from years of use. "Mom's famous snickerdoodles," read one. "Christmas morning coffee cake," said another. He placed them carefully in a cardboard box, his throat tight. The rumble of idle bulldozers outside seemed to mock his every movement. Their giant yellow forms cast long shadows through the windows, like waiting predators. "These ledgers go back to '86, he murmured to himself, pulling out stack after stack of worn books. Each page told a story. First-time customers who became regulars, children growing up and bringing their own kids. Generations of town history written in purchases and friendly notes. The bell above the door chimed. Martha Jensen from the quilting circle stepped in, followed by Tom from the hardware store and Pastor Mike. Their faces were drawn with concern. "Sam, you can't just give up," Martha said, her voice breaking. She grabbed an empty box and started helping him pack. "There must be something we can do." "The lawyer said it's ironclad," Sam replied, his voice heavy. "Mayor's office has all the permits. Property's already sold." Tom shook his head, angrily stuffing paper bags into a box. "It ain't right, Sam. This store's been here longer than most of us have been alive." Pastor Mike placed a gentle hand on Sam's shoulder. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, brother. Perhaps—" The door burst open again, the bell jangling violently. 8-year-old Emily Prescott rushed in, her face streaked with tears, her school backpack still on. "Uncle Sam! Uncle Sam!" she cried, running straight to him. "Please, don't let them take the store! Please!" Sam knelt down, his heart breaking at the sight of her distress. She threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. "I told Mommy she can't. I told her." The click of heels on hardwood announced Linda Prescott's arrival. She stood in the doorway, impeccable in her navy suit, but her face showed signs of strain. "Emily, I told you not to run off like that." "Mom, please." Emily turned to face her mother, still clutching Sam's sleeve. "This is my favorite place. Sam saved my life. How can you do this to him?" Linda's professional mask cracked slightly. She stepped forward, reaching for her daughter. "Sweetheart, we've discussed this. The town needs to grow. Progress cannot wait." "Progress?" Sam stood slowly, his voice quiet but firm. "Is that what you call destroying a place where people gather, where they share their lives?" Linda's jaw tightened. "Mr. Whitaker, I understand this is difficult, but sentiment can't stand in the way of necessary change. The mall will bring jobs, tax revenue. The mall will bring chain stores that don't know their customers' names," Martha cut in. "Won't remember their children's birthdays or hold their packages when they're sick." "Or give credit when times are hard," Tom added. Linda's eyes flashed. "Times being hard is exactly why we need this development. Do you know how many families in this town are struggling? How many young people leave because there's no opportunity here?" Sam walked to the counter, picking up Ellen's old apron. His fingers traced the faded embroidery of her name. "My wife believed that a town's heart wasn't in its wallet, Mayor Prescott. It was in its people caring for each other." Emily sniffled, looking up at her mother. "Mom, remember when you told me about getting penny candy here when you were little? About how Mrs. Whitaker always gave you an extra piece when you were sad?" For a moment, something flickered in Linda's eyes, a shadow of memory, perhaps even regret. But she straightened her shoulders, her expression hardening again. "Emily, come along now. Mr. Whitaker needs to finish packing." "No!" Emily stamped her foot. "Emily Grace Prescott!" Linda's voice cracked like a whip. "Now!" The little girl's shoulders slumped in defeat. She gave Sam one last desperate hug before trudging to her mother's side. Linda took her hand, leading her out without another word. The rest of the day passed in a blur of boxes and tears. One by one, the neighbors left, each farewell, feeling like another nail in the store's coffin. As darkness fell, Sam found himself alone in the shadowy aisles. He sank into the old chair behind the counter, Ellen's chair, where she'd sat to do the books every evening. The store felt different in the dark, almost like a church after services, empty but somehow still holy with memories. Sam clutched Ellen's apron to his chest, breathing in the faint traces of her perfume that somehow still clung to the fabric after all these years. Tears he'd held back all day finally broke free, rolling down his weathered cheeks. "I tried, Ellen," he whispered into the darkness. "I tried so hard to keep your dream alive." The bulldozer's shadows loomed larger in the streetlights outside. Sam closed his eyes, his prayer barely a whisper. "Lord, give me strength. Show me the way forward." Exhausted by grief, he drifted off in the chair, still holding the apron like a lifeline to everything he was about to lose. Sam jolted awake to the shrill ring of his phone. His neck ached from sleeping in the old wooden chair, Ellen's apron still clutched in his hands. The store was dark, except for the early morning light filtering through the dusty windows. "Mr. Whitaker?" A worried voice came through the line. "This is Nurse Matthews at County General. Emily Prescott was just admitted. She's been asking for you." Sam's heart lurched. What happened? Is she all right? She's having breathing difficulties, complications from the fire. Her grandmother suggested we call you. Sam was already pulling on his coat. Tell her I'm on my way. The drive to the hospital was a blur. Sam's hands gripped the steering wheel as memories of the fire flashed through his mind. The smoke, Emily's terrified face, the heat of the flames. Had he gotten her out too late? The guilt pressed heavy on his chest. At the hospital, a nurse led him to the pediatric ward. The antiseptic smell and squeaking linoleum floors brought back memories of Ellen's final days. But he pushed those thoughts aside as he approached Emily's room. The sight of her small form in the hospital bed made his breath catch. She looked so tiny against the white sheets, an oxygen mask covering her face. Her usually bright eyes were tired, but they lit up when she saw him. Uncle Sam! Her voice was muffled behind the mask, but the joy in it was clear. Hey there, sweetheart. Sam settled into the chair beside her bed, his weathered hand covering her small one. Giving everyone a scare, are you? Emily shook her head weakly. The smoke monster came back, she whispered. Sam's heart ached. He forced a smile. Well, we can't have that, can we? You know what always chases away monsters? Good stories. He leaned in closer. Did I ever tell you about the time your mom won the pie-eating contest at the county fair? Emily's eyes widened. Mom ate pie? Oh yes, she was about your age. Must have eaten 3 whole cherry pies. Had red juice all down her Sunday dress. Sam chuckled at the memory. Your grandmother was not happy about that dress, let me tell you. A small movement caught his eye. Linda stood in the doorway, her usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. She wore no makeup, and her eyes were red-rimmed. Sam had never seen her look so vulnerable. Emily's voice grew stronger behind the mask. Tell another one, Uncle Sam, please. So Sam told stories about the town, about the store, about all the little moments that made up a community. He told her about the time the Anderson twins got caught trying to sneak their pet goat into the store, and how old Mr. Peterson would sing opera while picking out his groceries. With each tale, Emily's breathing seemed to ease a little. I love your store, Emily whispered after a while. It smells like cookies and happiness. She turned to look at her mother, who had drifted closer during the stories. Please don't take it away, Mom. It's like home. Linda's carefully constructed facade cracked. She sank into the chair on the other side of Emily's bed, tears spilling down her cheeks. Oh, baby, she whispered, taking Emily's other hand. Then to Sam's surprise, she began to speak. When I was a little girl, my father owned the hardware store on Pine Street. Her voice was rough with emotion. It was our whole world. But then the big box stores came to town. We couldn't compete. I watched my father beg for loans, watched him grow smaller every day. She wiped her eyes. The day we closed, some kids from school stood outside, laughing at the going out of business signs. I swore I'd never let myself feel that helpless again. Sam listened quietly as Linda's story poured out. How she'd pushed herself through law school, climbed the political ladder, always fighting to stay ahead of failure. How she'd convinced herself that progress meant protection. That sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford. I thought I was making the town stronger, she said, her voice breaking. But I've been tearing it apart, haven't I? Sam leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Linda, community isn't weakness. It's the strongest foundation we have. Your daddy's store didn't fail because he cared too much. It failed because times changed. But caring for each other, that never goes out of style. Emily's small voice piped up from behind her mask. Daddy always said you can't build anything good without love. Linda let out a shaky breath, squeezing Emily's hand. When did you get so wise, baby girl? She looked up at Sam, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'll make this right. I promise. Sam saw something shift in Linda's eyes, a softening, a spark of understanding. The mayor was still there, but so was the little girl who once won a pie-eating contest and stained her Sunday dress. For the first time since the fire, hope didn't feel like a betrayal. Emily's eyes were growing heavy, the morning's excitement taking its toll. But she kept her grip on both their hands, binding them together across her hospital bed like a small bridge between past and future. The City Hall chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. Sam sat in the front row, his weathered hands clasped tightly in his lap. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. Next to him, Mrs. Henderson from the quilting circle patted his arm. "Whatever happens, Sam, we're all here with you." Her kind words barely penetrated the fog of anxiety that surrounded him. The massive petition lay on the council table like a testament to community spirit. Sam could see familiar names sprawled across its pages: teachers, shop owners, farmers, and families who had been coming to his store for generations. Each signature represented a memory, a connection, a piece of the town's heart. Council members filed in, their faces serious as they took their seats. The room fell silent when Mayor Linda Prescott entered, her heels clicking against the floor. She looked different today, less rigid, more human somehow. Her usual crisp blazer was replaced by a softer blue cardigan, and her face carried an expression Sam had never seen before. "I call this meeting to order," Linda announced, her voice echoing in the hushed chamber. She shuffled some papers, then looked up at the crowd. For a moment, their eyes met, and Sam saw something that looked like understanding pass between them. "Before we proceed with the final vote on the downtown redevelopment project," Linda continued, "I have some remarks to share." She stepped out from behind the podium, moving to stand directly before the townspeople. Her hands trembled slightly as she began speaking. "When I first proposed this project, I believed progress meant demolishing the old to make way for the new. I saw sentiment as weakness and tradition as an obstacle to growth." She paused, swallowing hard. "I was wrong." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Sam leaned forward, hardly daring to breathe. "Sometimes it takes a crisis to show us what truly matters," Linda went on, her voice growing stronger. "When my daughter was trapped in that fire, it wasn't modern buildings or economic projections that saved her. It was the courage and kindness of a man who represents everything I thought we needed to leave behind." She turned to face Sam directly. "Mr. Whitaker didn't just save Emily's life. He showed me what real strength looks like. It's not found in steel and glass towers. It's found in the connections we build, the traditions we honor, and the places that make us who we are." Emily, sitting with her grandmother near the back, beamed at Sam. She looked better now, the color returned to her cheeks, though she still carried a small oxygen tank just in case. "Therefore," Linda declared, straightening her shoulders, "I am announcing a significant modification to the redevelopment plan. The project will proceed with one crucial change. Whitaker's General Store will be preserved and designated as a protected cultural landmark." For a moment, the room was absolutely still. Then, like a dam breaking, joy erupted. People jumped to their feet, cheering and hugging each other. Mrs. Henderson burst into happy tears, and the pastor pumped his fist in the air. Sam sat motionless, overwhelmed by the surge of emotion around him. He thought of Ellen, how she would have loved this moment. He could almost hear her voice. "See, Sam? Sometimes miracles come wrapped in ordinary packages." Linda raised her hands for quiet. "Furthermore, the city will establish a grant program to help modernize and maintain historic businesses like Mr. Whitaker's. We don't have to choose between progress and preservation. We can honor both." More applause followed, but Linda wasn't finished. "I want to thank this community for teaching me what true leadership means. And I want to thank my daughter Emily, whose wisdom far exceeds her years. She showed me that sometimes the most important voice is the smallest one." The formal vote that followed was unanimous. Sam barely registered the procedural details through the fog of relief and gratitude that enveloped him. People crowded around, offering congratulations and hugs, but he found himself moving through the crowd toward Linda. They met in the middle of the chamber, away from the celebrating masses. Linda extended her hand and Sam took it. Their handshake was firm, respectful, a gesture of peace between former adversaries who had found common ground. "Thank you," Sam said simply. Linda shook her head. "No, thank you, Mr. Whitaker, for saving my daughter, for showing me what community really means." Before either could say more, Emily darted between them and threw her arms around Sam's waist, her face turned up to his, bright with joy and absolute certainty. "You're my hero," she declared. The words, so simple and pure, struck Sam right in the heart. He hugged Emily back, feeling in that moment that everything, all the worry, all the fear, all the grief, had led him exactly where he needed to be. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fresh paint and coffee as Sam stood before Whitaker's General Store on reopening day. Sunlight glinted off the new brass plaque mounted beside the entrance. His fingers traced the engraved words, "A place of hope, dedicated to Ellen Whitaker and to the community she loved." The storefront gleamed with its fresh coat of warm cream paint, the green trim restored to its original vibrancy. Wooden rocking chairs, newly stained and cushioned, lined the wide front porch where Ellen used to serve lemonade on hot summer days. Through the sparkling windows, the old wooden shelves had been lovingly restored, their rich patina glowing in the morning light. Inside, the transformation was even more remarkable. The original hardwood floors, hidden for decades under linoleum, now shone with a deep amber polish. In one corner, comfortable armchairs surrounded a stone fireplace, a reading nook that already had become a favorite spot for the town's book club. The ceiling fans spun lazily overhead, their brass fixtures catching the light that streamed through the tall windows. "Uncle Sam!" Emily's voice rang out as she bounded through the door, her dark braids bouncing. "Can I help arrange the candy jars?" She wore a miniature apron that matched Sam's, complete with the store's logo that Linda had helped design. "Of course, sweetheart." Sam smiled, watching as she carefully lined up the glass containers on the old maple counter. Her small hands worked with surprising precision, making sure each jar sat perfectly straight. The bell above the door chimed steadily as townspeople streamed in. Mrs. Henderson settled into her usual spot by the coffee counter, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically. The pastor sat nearby, sharing stories with young parents who brought their children to hear tales of the town's history. Linda Prescott entered, looking relaxed in casual clothes, a far cry from her former suited appearance. She carried a basket of fresh muffins from her mother's recipe, something she'd never have done months ago. "Good morning, Sam," she called warmly, setting the basket on the counter. "Emily, those jars look perfect." "Mom, look what Uncle Sam taught me." Emily proudly demonstrated how to use the old-fashioned candy scale, carefully measuring out chocolate drops for a young customer. The store hummed with activity. In the new cafe area, teenagers did homework while elderly couples shared coffee and memories. The community bulletin board overflowed with notices for local events, many of which would now be held right here in the store's meeting space. Sam moved between the shelves, straightening items and greeting customers by name. He paused at the wall where Ellen's original recipes were now framed, her chicken pot pie instructions next to her famous snickerdoodle cookie recipe, her handwriting preserved behind glass like precious artifacts. "Sam," Linda touched his arm gently, "the Historical Society dropped this off." She handed him a framed black and white photograph showing the store on its opening day in 1986. Ellen stood proudly in the doorway, her smile radiant. "We thought it should hang here, where everyone can remember." Sam's throat tightened as he carefully mounted the photograph next to the recipe collection. "She would have loved all this," he said softly, "the way it's become even more of a gathering place than before." "She knew what this town needed," Linda replied, watching Emily help another child count out pennies for candy. "A place where everyone belongs." Throughout the afternoon, the store filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation. Old-timers taught youngsters how to play checkers on the vintage board near the window. A group of middle school students huddled around the new coffee bar, sipping hot chocolate and working on their history project about the town's founding families. Sam kept Ellen's old ledger open on the counter, though now it served more as a guest book than an accounting record. People loved to flip through its pages, pointing out their grandparents' signatures and sharing stories of purchases made decades ago. As the sun began to set, its golden light painted the walls in warm hues. The day's activities slowly wound down. Emily reluctantly hung up her apron, giving Sam a tight hug before leaving with Linda. Regular customers gathered their belongings, calling out goodbye with promises to return tomorrow. Sam stepped outside onto the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The street lamps flickered on, casting a gentle glow over the town square. A few people still rocked in the chairs, savoring the peaceful evening. Looking up at the store's sign, Sam felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. "We made it, love," he whispered to Ellen's memory. We're home. The words felt right, carrying all the weight of their shared dreams and the lightness of promises kept. With a full heart, he turned to the door. The brass plaque caught the last rays of sunlight, Ellen's name shining like a beacon. Sam reached for the light switch, knowing that while the physical lights might go out, the warmth and light that filled this place would never truly fade. The store had become exactly what Ellen had always envisioned, not just a business, but a hearth where the community's heart could always find its way home. Sam Whitaker's courage saved a little girl, but hours later, the very mother of that child, the mayor, hammered the gavel that would seal his fate. The store he built with his late wife's love now stands in the shadow of bulldozers, and the question echoes, will compassion prevail, or will progress crush the town's heart forever? But just as all hope seems lost, one voice will rise to change everything. Will Sam's legacy survive, or fall to rubble? The answer lies in the next chapter. Click here to watch the next video and see what happens next. Subscribe now so you never miss the stories that stir your heart. Comment below with your theory. Should the mayor keep her word, or will the town rise stronger than ever? Stories like Sam's remind us that even in the face of loss, community and compassion can spark miracles. I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what part of Sam's story touched your heart most? Please share your reflections in the comments below. If you believe in the power of hope, redemption, and second chances, I invite you to subscribe and follow along. Together, we can keep telling the kinds of stories that bring light into the world. And remember this, you are seen, you are valued, and your story matters just as much as the ones we tell here. Until next time, stay inspired, stay hopeful, and never forget, change is always possible.